Welcome to Village in Motion. I'm Clint Lambert. I'm the host today, and it's Monday, May 22nd, and we are just really glad that you've joined us this morning. Today, as I mentioned, we have an exciting show. Jim Coulter, who's kind of known as the guru of wines and spirits around Green Spring, is with us to discuss summer wines and some other places in regards to that. Jim, welcome. Glad to have you with us as always.
It's always nice to be here, Clint. Thank you.
I understand you're going to be talking some about summer wines, as well as other things.
It's that time of year again.
Yes.
And a lot of people are thinking about summer vacation,
Right.
summer picnics. There's lots of wine festivals going on, so there
really are.
You know, people are traveling someplace. Why they may want to stop by and visit a local wine festival. Lots of local wineries. Virginia's getting close to 300 wineries now.
Wow.
In the state, and a little later I'll give people some tips about traveling and things to do. But I thought we talk about summer wines, and of course you can drink any wine in the summer, and red wines go especially well with things like grilled steaks,
Yes.
hamburgers,
Right.
stuff like that. But you also have lighter wines.
Right.
Some of the heavier, like Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Merlot, tend to be a little heavy.
They're heavy in the summer.
Yeah. And drinking them outside,
Right.
maybe you want something that's chilled. If you're like some people I know, and you love red wine, and you can't wait to have some ice cold red wine with your barbecue. There are a couple of red wines that do go well with that kind of stuff. Lambrusco is a red wine from Italy.
And it naturally has got to be good. It starts with lamb.
That's right, and it's slightly fizzy.
Okay.
And it's usually served chilled. So if you're sitting outdoors and you want red wine with, your steaks or burgers or whatever, or you're one of those strange people like some of my friends that just love red wine no matter what, you could do that. Also, Beaujolais, which is made with the Gamay grape. You can also get Gamay from California and other places. But Beaujolais especially is usually served slightly chilled, and it's a lighter style wine. It's a little more fruity in flavor.
Is it tannic at all?
It's slightly tannic, like any red wine would be, but it's not nearly as much so as the more robust, Pinot Noirs and some of those others. So it's a nice wine for all kinds of food, and as I said, you can serve it chilled, have it slightly chilled, or you can chill it even more. And then of course you got all your red wines and rosés. Rosés are going through a renaissance, unless it's a renaissance. But
it's a renaissance.
But whatever it is, it's going through one of those periods when they sort of fell out of favor years ago, and now they're kind of coming back. People are making more and more pink wines, but not the bubblegum style pink or white Zinfandel pink wines that are very sugary and so forth.
You mentioned Zinfandel. Is the red Zinfandel considered a rosé, or is it considered a red wine?
It's a traditional red wine.
Okay.
It's made in the same style as Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and so forth. But it's also made in a light rosé style. One of the things they wanted to do was when the red Zinfandel market kind of softened and people were going more to Pinot Noir and Merlot after a couple of movies came out that made those popular. They started blending them, making them in a lighter style, and a lot of the rosés are made with red grapes. They make a rosé of Cabernet Sauvignon, a rosé of Pinot Noir, a rosé of Merlot, which basically the red color in the wine comes from the length of time that the red skins are in contact with the grape juice during fermentation. And what they do is they just stop the fermentation earlier or take the skins off, and when the wine is an appropriate pink color for whatever they're marketing people or whatever the winemaker thinks is enough pinkness in the wine. The other way that you can do that is you can make a regular red grape wine, like Cabernet Sauvignon, and just add some of the red wine to the white white wine to make a rosé.
So you truly are mixing white and red.
Right.
Okay.
And that's done traditionally with pink champagne, because champagne is itself is a white wine.
Right.
And what they will do if they want to make a rosé champagne is they'll add Pinot Noir to the white wine before the second fermentation in the bottle, and that makes a rosé champagne. And since Pinot Noir is one of the grapes that's in the champagne anyway, that works that way.
You just mentioned champagne. I think everybody needs to know champagne is actually an official name in France, right? And
That's
it really should not be used in the U.S. if you're ordering it, right?
Exactly. It's the name of a region in France, and according to French law and international treaties, if you call a wine champagne, it has to be made in that Champagne region with grapes from that region.
Okay.
They have other champagne style wines that they make in France, Crémant de Bourgogne, and other regions, sparkling Sommer, which are made in the champagne method. With a lot of them use the same kind of grapes that they use, but they can't call them champagne.
Right.
France has Cava, Italy Prosecco, California, since the U.S. never agreed to that, have some wines that they call champagne. But it's interesting that California sparkling wine that's made by French-owned companies calls theirs California sparkling wine, but they prominently display the name of the French wine company on it. And there's 6 or 7 wineries in California that make great sparkling wine.
Yeah, some really good sparkling wines.
The same way that they do in France, but they sell it under their name here, but they don't call it champagne.
Okay.
But it is an excellent summer wine.
Yeah.
Because it's got those refreshing bubbles in your mouth. You can serve it ice cold, and who doesn't like champagne? don't argue with me.
Yeah, right.
But that's one of my personal favorite all-time. I mean, if I'm going to be drinking wine any time of year, and somebody says, "Price is no object, I'm buying. What do you want?"
Champagne.
I'll look for the most expensive champagne on the wine list. Or I'll look for 2 bottles of the second most expensive. Yeah. But it's a great drink, and it's wonderful with food because it will go with all styles of food, anything from fish to fowl to seafood.
And it goes year round. I mean.
Yes, it goes year round, and like I said, and it's good. Rosé wines are particularly popular in the summer, as we mentioned, and there's a lot of rosés made in the U.S. There's a bunch made in Virginia. The best places for rosé wines in the U.S. are, of course, California, because they make 95% of the U.S. wines, but also Washington State and Oregon, because the climate there at that parallel of latitude or longitude, latitude, is on the same as what it is in the Champagne region of France.
Okay.
So those kinds of grapes, the Pinot Gris, the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, do particularly well there. And since they grow so many grapes there, they make a lot of wine, and they have plenty available that they can make into rosés, and they make some outstanding rosés in both Oregon and Washington.
So along the Wilmette Valley and in the Red River area?
Yep. Okay. All of those, all of the wine growing regions up there wineries will have rosé wines that they make. And like I said, a lot of the wineries in Virginia are making rosé wines, because when summer comes here, there's nothing like an ice cold, refreshing glass of rosé to make you feel good, because it does get hot and sticky as it was last week and this week.
Well, this week it's going to get hot and sticky, especially the next couple of days here. I mean, in regards to that.
It's going to be a great time to be thinking about summer wines.
Right. You know, and people may want to have a summer wine rather than having a beer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you do, I would recommend summer is a great time to try new and different kinds of wine. Maybe you haven't had a Verdeo, which is a Spanish grape.
Yes.
It's very popular there, and they grow those in quite a few wineries here in Virginia now. Another one in Virginia that's a good white wine is made with a grape called Petit Manseng, which is despite the Manseng word in there, it's actually a French grape, and it makes a nice, soft, not sweet but not dry wine, which is very good with food. And again, nice cold glass of that sitting out on the patio or sitting outside of your apartment. Right. So it's a nice way to start or end the evening.
So repeat the name of this.
Petit Manseng.
Petit Manseng.
Yeah.
And you can get it at Total. You can get it to most of the places around here.
Yeah, most wine stores here will, if they carry Virginia wines, and Total does, will have it. Trader Joe's, I don't know if I haven't seen Petit Manseng there. I know they don't carry Virginia wines, but they like any good wine store. If you go in and say I'm looking for a nice summer wine. But I'd like something, not the usual Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc. What can you recommend? They'll usually say, well, we've got 3 or 4 ones here I'd recommend. Okay. And they should be able to explain to you what it tastes like, what the taste would compare to, what you might think of, or they'll ask you what's your favorite white wine, and then say, well, this is similar to that.
You won't find that kind of assistance in Kmart or in Safeway or those kinds of places? Not
yet, although the way Walmart is pushing their wine, they may be getting somebody. I know that Costco used to just put stuff out there, and now they've got a wine manager there and a department manager. So it never hurts to ask, because even if they don't have somebody whose official job it is to do that, a lot of stores, grocery stores, whatever, that sell wine will usually have somebody on staff whose job it is to order it or take inventory. Or there's I've found at Trader Joe's a lot of the checkout clerks are very helpful when you're checking. They say, oh, I've tried that, that's good.
Yes, right.
A lot of the people there that drink wine are more than happy to share their experiences with you.
And then, like at Wegmans, they have the tastings every week. It seems
Total has tastings. Wegman has tastings. And again, there's a bunch. Most wine stores, probably in Alexandria, Fairfax, McLean, on the weekends will have free tastings of wine. Okay.
With the summer wines, one thing you haven't mentioned are the white wines.
Well, Verdeo is a white wine. Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. Right. There's Riesling is a good one, and there's a bunch of white wines, some of which I can't think of the names of the grapes right offhand, but are sold under a proprietary brand name. And a good one, if you're not usually a white wine drinker, or if you're one of those people who only orders Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, because that's basically what you know. You might want to think about trying a grape called Chenin Blanc, which in California is usually used to make a fairly sweet style of wine, but in South Africa, Chenin Blanc is their primary white grape, and the fermentation style there, along with the terroir in which the grapes are grown, produces a wine that's more like a California Chardonnay, but without the big oaky overtones that California Chardonnay has. It's a nice, easy drinking white wine, and South African wines are available here from starting around $6 or $7 going up. At Total, you get a good selection of Chenin Blanc, for example, between $6 and $10. Yeah.
And it's a really nice light wine.
It is. It's good drinking. Again, it's good with food. It's very, very pleasant. And if you haven't had any South African wines, they also make a red wine called Pinotage, which the Pinotage grape is a cross blend of 2 French varietals. I won't guess at which ones they are. didn't read up on that. Didn't read it. But Pinotage is the primary red wine grape in South Africa, and it's a much heavier style of wine with a distinctive character to the flavor. It's some people love it, some people don't like it, but it does go well with food. And it's if you're having lamb, for example, the Pinotage is a great wine, as is Syrah. They're both good red wines for lamb if you're barbecuing lamb outside.
If people are watching the screen, I hope they're noticing the processing of the grapes coming into the winery.
The grapes are being crushed and destemmed, and juice pumped over, ready to go into the fermentation tanks.
And you mentioned the fact of you don't get the oaky flavor in some wines.
Right.
But that's because they don't use oak, right?
That's right. There's a bunch of different ways you can get oak flavor in wine. Everything from a few drops of oak extract to putting oak chips in the fermentation tanks, to doing the fermentation in oak tanks and then storing them in oak barrels and letting them age, and they get that vanilla kind of flavor. And speaking of barrels, I was just reading an article in the wine column in the Washington Post a few days ago about a Virginia winery out here who's making very expensive red wines. And he announced he's selling his premier wine for $70 a bottle.
That's a little expensive.
And he's selling it all because it's that good. But
wow.
He's also got a wine for $30 that he sells. But the interesting thing is that he's using French oak barrels for his aging. They make barrels with oak from Tennessee and Kentucky with American oak. The American oak barrels are used primarily for making whiskey. The grain is very wide in the American oak. The French oak grain tends to be very tight, and it makes the connoisseurs say it makes a smoother, less tannic, better tasting
because you aren't getting so much of the oak.
You're not getting so much oak, and in white wines like Chardonnay, some of us like a lot of oak flavor in that, the vanilla flavor, the oak flavor of the wine, probably because I buy mostly cheap wines, and they use cheap grapes, and a lot of that oak will help cover up the defects in the wine. But it's a very pleasant taste, but it doesn't go with all kinds of food.
Right, exactly.
And sometimes if you're going to have Chardonnay, you want a Chardonnay that's unoaked or very lightly oaked, because if you're having it with seafood, why it can have kind of spoil the taste of the seafood, or the seafood will spoil the taste of the wine.
And you have to have a taste for it.
Yeah.
You really do.
You do.
And there are some wineries that just use steel.
Yes.
Use steel vats.
You can use stainless steel for fermentation, for storage. It's used a lot for wines like Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc,
Pinot Grigio,
and the advantage of that is that it doesn't impart any outside flavors to the wine. You get the taste of the wine itself, and the grapes pick up the earthy flavors, the minerals in the soil, and the winemaker likes that aspect of it. You're tasting the true taste of the wine without any stuff to hide the character of it.
And that's something I prefer as opposed to the oaky taste, because that way you truly have the taste of the grape and the wine that's made from the grape, as opposed to introducing the tree parts.
And that's where the art of deciding which wine to drink with which food comes into play, because some people like what they call a mystical marriage between the wine and the food, because obviously tomatoes have a very distinctive taste, and if you're having pizza with a lot of tomato sauce on it, there are certain wines that don't go nearly as well with that the
Exactly.
tomatoes and cheese, as other wines would
Yeah.
enhance both the flavor of the wine and the pizza.
And so that's
it's
the
same, same thing for fish or any other thing.
And that's the reason really learning about pairings
That's right.
of what wine goes with what foods, in regards to it.
Yeah, and one of the advantages of going to visit wineries,
Yes.
which is something else you can do in the summer on your way to one of those
There you
wine
go.
festivals, you can stop by and visit a winery, and quite often wineries or sometimes restaurants too will have offerings of wine and food pairing,
Yes.
either menus or they'll have little snacks on the bar at the winery that you can
Right.
taste with different wines. The reason I mention that is the Washingtonian magazine this month is featuring article on
Day trips.
75 day trips you can take
Yes.
from the Washington area,
Wonderful.
and they mentioned wineries in Virginia and Maryland. The other thing I would mention is there used to be a Virginia wine magazine. They've now changed their name. It's now called
Savor.
Savor Virginia. It's basically the same idea, but they've expanded their focus from just wine to wine, beer, distilled spirits,
okay.
restaurants. It's a good thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is there's a website called virginiawine.org, and this is one of the brochures you can pick up at the
Okay.
Virginia Travel Office.
Right.
You go to virginiawine.org, and they have a place on there you can sign up, and they will send you a map of Virginia showing where all
the wineries.
287 wineries are in Virginia, with a little write-up on each one that has basic directions,
Oh,
has the
nice.
winery website,
Yeah.
telephone number, tells you what hours they're open. Some are open just on weekends, others are open all week. It's a good resource, and it's something I recommend anybody who drives keep in
Yeah.
the glove compartment of their car, because you never know when out-of-town visitors might show up.
Right.
And your spouse turns to you and says, "Well, Clint, what are we going to do with them for the next 2 days?" And you could say, "Just a second, honey," and run to the glove compartment and say, "Oh, look, I got a map of wineries."
Yeah.
"Well, I don't think they drink." "Well, they will after driving around with me all day." But it's a handy thing to have, and I usually get a couple at total and give them to friends
Yeah.
that I know are interested in wine, and I usually keep 3 or 4 around the apartment, because somebody somewhere at dinner or
Right.
passing in the hall will say, "My kids are coming with their kids this weekend, and I don't want to go to King's Dominion. Any ideas what to do?" I said, "Well, I got a map of Virginia wineries. Are the kids old enough to drink?" Says, "Yeah, but their kids aren't old enough to drink, but they're driving their parents to drink." And I said, "Oh, here, I'll tell you, here's a map of wineries."
But some of the wineries, though, have
They have activities for
activities
kids.
for kids. I'm thinking about Crystalis
Right.
out in
Yeah. They got
Middleburg.
games they can play,
Right.
things they can do. Yeah, and the Washingtonian magazine on the day trip also talks about places to eat and things to see. So if you're going to Middleburg,
Right.
they'll write up there about different places you can drop the kids at the Red Fox Inn and let them sit there and wait for the fox to come by.
Yeah, a day trip around here to a winery is really convenient.
Yeah.
They're close by.
And you usually pass half a dozen things like battlefields,
Yeah,
amusement
exactly.
parks,
Yeah.
local museums, and there's a lot of interesting stuff. Manassas, Warrenton,
Right.
Centerville have local museums
Right.
that, if the kids have never heard of these towns, why?
Well, even a lot of people who've never been out themselves and visited.
That's right.
Now that we're retired, we have the time and.
Or those of us that had to learn about them in school and have completely forgotten everything we learned in school.
But one of the things I would caution people about, if you're going to a wine tasting, if you're going to a winery, drink wisely, responsibly.
Drink responsibly,
Yes.
if you drink at all.
Yes.
The best thing I know, I think I've told this. My wife and I used to take a trip to California with 2 friends of ours, and the female was a drinker like Mina and I. The guy didn't drink at all.
Yeah.
And our deal with him was we'd drop him off at the racetrack a couple of days, and he'd drive the rest of the time, drive us around the
Which is
wineries.
tremendous, yeah.
And he'd get our input at dinner time and We'd
It's
have
always
to sit and
better.
listen to stories about horse racing.
Right. But it's always better to have a designated driver.
Always better.
I mean, yeah.
And a lot of the limo companies and transportation companies around here have limo tours or winery tours that they're, you can hire a car and driver for the day for a couple of $100, which is a lot of money to get from here to Middleburg. But on the other hand, it's a lot cheaper than having an accident and having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages.
And even Robin in our travel section, and have organizes trips to wineries, and it's like almost every month that there's at least one trip to a winery.
She has one coming up in a day or two here this month, and I wouldn't be surprised that some of the months during the summer she doesn't have 2 trips a month.
Yeah.
And if anybody out there has a winery that they want to visit, if it's read the Washingtonian and then suggest to Robin that maybe that sounds like that would be an interesting place for Green Spring to go, and she can set something up.
Although I would like to go back to Lambert's Winery in West Virginia.
Something about the name of that winery just scares me. I'm not sure.
No relation to the family that owns it, just the name. But it's in Weston, West Virginia, and that's about 60 miles or so south of Morgantown.
Oh.
And so it's just a really nice place to go. Vicki and I just recently visited there and met the whole family that operates it. They were a logging family who decided they'd have enough of logging, and so they started a winery. And the father has retired once, and he's getting ready to retire again, and the oldest son is taking over the business and doing a superb job. But it's a beautiful place, nice place to go for the summer.
Sounds like the kind of place where there'd be some interesting tourist stuff to see too.
There is, and
West Virginia's full of interesting stuff,
including the insane asylum that's there, and they still use that name in West Virginia. So, but interesting place to go.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of things to do, a lot of places to go and see. And what Vicki and I did, we just kind of did a couple of day tour down to Charlottesville and to Horton, and we even went out to Trump's winery. And then across the mountains and went over to West Virginia and went to Lambert's. So, encourage people to get out, see what's out there, and visit some of the wineries. But please, 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 drink responsibly, drink with food, and I think it's really the reason that it's really good to do food pairings.
And one of the things about taking the wine trips is you can visit the winery and just taste a small little 1 ounce taste of 1 or 2 wines.
Yes.
And then if you find something you really like, you can buy a bottle or 2 of it, and you can either take it to the restaurant with you for dinner that night, because most restaurants in Virginia will let you bring your own wine if they don't have it on the wine list, or you can just bring them back and set up a meal with friends here and say, got a couple of bottles of wine here I bought on the trip. You guys have dinner with us, and we'll share those.
Exactly.
And depending on what your reputation is, they'll either say yes or no, I don't like the wines you picked.
Well, the other thing is that by visiting wineries, and especially in different places, is that some of the wineries do not ship out, or they do not sell outside the borders of that particular state.
Yep.
And so it's always interesting to go on a trip, like we've gone to Nebraska and Montana and everything, to stop at different places and pick up a bottle, bring it back and share it with friends and talk about where you went in regards to it. So really encourage people to get out, enjoy the summer.
That's the important thing is take time to get out, especially with family and friends, and visit, see the country. Summer's a great time to be out visiting, seeing things. Most of the places that you would want to go to are open in the summer. They're looking for business. It's a great way to spend time.
Yeah. And taste the different kinds of wines. You may find one that you really like
That's
in
right.
regards
You may
to
get
it.
surprised.
You're never surprised. But Jim, again, always, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yes, you provided a lot of information, and I'm sure people are listening will take it to heart, okay?
I hope so.
All right. Don't go away, folks. We've got some announcements coming up. And the very first one.